Hello and welcome. In today's episode we're going to be building a stitching pony. Now I'm going for a fairly small stitching pony, so it'll be 34 centimetres or 340 millimetres. So we're going to mark both of those on. So as you can see we've got two blue dots, one there and one there. And now we need to work out how long we want this to be, how wide we want this to be. I think 9 centimetres or 90 millimetres would be a really nice size to do this. So I've got this bit here left over, and this is actually really useful because we can use this piece to space one of the arms away from the other so that we have a nice opening and closing function. We're also going to need some jaws. I'll be using Zebrano for the jaws purely because this is the only thin wood I have. This is 10mm thick. I then marked the Zebrano thin, which I was going to use to make the inside of the jaw with. So I'm going to switch the blade in my jigsaw for something a little bit nicer to cut with. So there we go, we got a much finer tooth blade compared to this. I then cut the piece of poplar to size. I was going to use this poplar to make the arms or the jaws of this stitching pony. Alright, so I cut those pieces out. That blade is absolutely lovely. It's really nice to use. We now need to cross cut this across the grain. So we've just rip-sawed that. Now we need to cross cut it to get it into two arms for the stitching pony. Using my tenon saw, I then cross cut the piece of timber to the right size. I then cut the Zebrano to size. I started using my hand saw, but then finished it off with the jigsaw. So we're just applying a light coating of Gorilla Glue over the whole of the face of the Zebrano. I then used a combination of F clamps and some G clamps as well as some spring clamps to clamp it all together. Alright, so we're going to glue the support spacer on now. So this just acts as a spacer to keep the two arms or jaws of the stitching pony apart. So again, I'm just going to use a little dab of Gorilla Glue on this. Alright, so we're going to remove the clamps. It's 7:45 in the morning because it's just too hot to do a lot in a day. Now though, we need to sort out all of this paint here and make it look a bit nice. So the first thing we're going to do is mark a 45° across the face of the arm. I think this just improves the look of it a lot, and it's just a bit of a fun decorative touch. But first, I'm going to paint some glue onto this bit of the board. This would just help with end grain because it's not particularly good at gluing very well. Using my tenon saw, I then cut the 45° angle onto the top of the jaws. You don't have to do this, but I do feel it really adds to the aesthetics of this stitching pony, and it just makes it more comfortable to use. As you just saw, I had a bit of an issue with the first one cutting through. I didn't cut it very well. Using my block plane, I then rounded over all of the edges of this stitching pony and used my file to clean up the top face of the Zebrano. Okay, so we've clamped down our stitching pony, and now we're going to basically mark on where we want the hole to be, which will actually act as the clamping mechanism. So I'm going to go about 200mm up, or 8 inches, give or take a couple of mil. So about there will do. And then I also want to make sure it's centred, so this board is about 9, so we need to go about 4.5 across. I'm going to actually go 4.6, just purely, well, 4.55 to be exact. So if you can see that little cross, that is where we need to drill, just there. I'm going to be using this bolt, so I need to measure how the diameter of this bolt. I then measured the diameter of the bolt, which was 6mm, and drilled a 6.5mm hole to account for this. I then sanded over the whole of the stitching pony using my Bosch sander. I went all the way up to 180 grit, but you could easily stop at 120. I also made sure to round over the edges of this piece so that it wasn't sharp. I then also sanded the oak before planing it with my block plane just to add a nice round over. For some reason the time-lapse didn't record this, which is a pain. So we've drilled 5 holes just randomly into it. That's nice and secure now. Hopefully my phone will survive this without overheating again. I ended up cutting the bolt a tiny bit. It took forever, but I've cut off that. So it's a bit shorter. So this is just an ordinary hinge. I think it's a cabinet hinge though, so it's a bit specialist, I guess. We're going to use these screws and do a couple of pilot holes, or I might just bradawl them, I don't know yet. Using some 12mm screws, I then attached the hinge to the stitching pony. That's fine. But as you can see, I can hold the pony vise up, stitching horse, sorry, by the bubble wrap, proving the strength of this. So the last thing to do is put some layers of food safe oil on. I'll time lapse. The last thing to do on this project was apply some oil. I went with food safe oil purely because I was going to be using this for leather. If you want to, you could paint it, although I think that would really detract from the beauty of the wood. Otherwise, you could just lacquer it or do something like that. Here's some photos of how the project turned out. I really hope you enjoyed watching this. Don't forget to share it around, like and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching.